Freedom Fighters, I'm coming back at you with another Manic Monday rant, and it is gonna be manic. And I'm just gonna go ahead and start this one off with a disclaimer because I know it's gonna be spicy. This video is not gonna be encouraging violence or supporting violence or in any way. So don't go do anything and then say freedom fighter told you to do it, because here I am telling you not to. But anyway, I saw this clip the other day, a while back during the Charlie Kirk memorial, from this channel, and they were talking about the political atmosphere and stuff, that the situation we find ourselves in. And they were talking about how they weren't conservative or whatnot, but they empathized with what happened to Charlie. And she said she was actually more of a libertarian, and she was for Ron Paul, which is cool because that's kind of like where I come from. I mean, that's my origin story of being a libertarian and all that. And I saw a ton of videos just like that. I mean, from full on liberal channels, Democrat supporters or whatnot, saying the same thing. Like, hey, I didn't like Charlie Kirk, or I didn't agree with Charlie Kirk, but I didn't want to see him, spill his neck out on national TV. But, the main point of that video was, the violence is unacceptable. We always hear this: violence is never an option. You have to debate and, write your congressman, voting, yada, yada, yada. The whole 9 yards. We've talked about this over and over. Now this channel is more about like a communism, a experience under communism, being an immigrant from a communist country. They're from Cuba, and I wasn't gonna name the channel, but the context here kind of matters, so I'll just go ahead and do it. It's called Yoel and Mari. And again, it's not really a political channel. It's more of a vlog and travel channel. They do like food reviews and stuff like that. But recently they've been doing political interviews and stuff like that. And um, just a little while back, I think during the election and stuff like that, she actually started another channel to talk politics specifically. But, anyway, to the point, they're, anti-communist, obviously, from where they come from. And they talk about, a lot of the things that go on in Cuba and what they lived under. And I think Yoel still has family there. And he often gets sad in the videos thinking about, the stuff that they don't get to experience, because that's what he's talking about. Like, they'll go out and he'll be like, my first time ever having a steak. And, while he's eating that steak, he's happy to do so, but he's thinking back at his family who's never had a steak and probably won't ever have the opportunity to go out and eat a steak. And then he goes, to amusement parks and football games. And that's the whole point, is like he's experiencing, America. And while he goes out and does these grand activities, he knows his family's living under communism. So, that's what the main point of the channel, I guess, is. But, back to violence, or whatever I was thinking about, was, I got a comment on my past video, talking about where I was like, do we even have what it takes to win? Do we know what it takes to win? And I'd like to ask Yoel and Mari, how do you fix Cuba? How do you think you're gonna fix Cuba? And I've watched another channel too. It was similar. It was a guy from North Korea, and same thing. He actually escaped. He was a North Korean escapee. But how do you fix these kind of tyrannical dictatorships? Will it not be violence? Will you not be spilling the blood of the Cuban guard or military or whatever? You know, and the same people. who are never saying like, oh, you can't do anything or whatnot, uh, isn't overthrowing the regime pretty much the only way? And they don't have any guns because every oppressive force, every tyrannical, communist, dictatorial regime always takes the means to freedom, and that is the arms, that is the guns. So will it not take sharpening every stick, every table leg, grabbing every fork and knife, lighting the torches, and fighting for your freedom? I mean, do they even have forks and knives anymore? I don't know. I mean, heck, even in Europe, they're dulling all the knives, and sharp knives are like not even sold. Axes and stuff like that are under lock and key. I think you need special permits for like industrial grade equipment and all this stuff, saw blades and all this stuff, because they're literally going to a point where, I mean, they'll say that's because it's street crime, but really they're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to protect their own backs. But or do you think the Cuban people just need to, voice their opinion, and they don't have a First Amendment. They need to start a party and start a political revolution. There is no opposition, and they've said this multiple times. They've actually gone to some of these debates and stuff like that during the election. And he said, regardless of these people's opinions, the fact that you're allowed out here and to debate with each other and disagree is something that they didn't have back home, because there is no discussions. And that's why you need a Second Amendment. Again, people always talk about it's for the hunting, and you have the right to hunt and procure food, and that's a thing since the beginning of time. Or people often think about it, it's a discussion of self-defense, and you have the right to protect yourself or your family. And what I always try to get across to people when they say this stuff is, no, the Second Amendment is purely there for the number one reason: to defend yourself against a tyrannical and oppressive government. One that's going to, you know, dictate over your rights and your freedoms. And I've actually said before, the left is actually using the second as intended. When there was that attempt on Trump, on the president, and even Charlie Kirk or whatnot. The Second Amendment isn't just there for when the person in the crosshairs is aimed in the right direction. Sometimes it's your guy, and I'm not supporting what they try to do to Trump or what they did to Charlie Kirk, but I understand them. I understand where they're coming from. And like I've said, you're in a civil war. What do you expect it to look like? It ain't going to be pretty, and people on both sides get taken out, and they lose, people on both sides. And I've studied the left enough, to understand them. You can see why someone does something and not agree with it. I saw this news report like a week or two back about a guy in Texas, um, where somebody ran over his dog, and he pulled him out. He carjacked the guy, pulled him out by gunpoint, and put him to the side of the road, and made him dig a ditch, dig his grave. And I don't know how they ended up catching this guy. I mean, I guess bystanders saw it and called it in or whatnot. And the comments section was actually pretty supportive for the guy, which, I understood as well. And that's what I mean. Like, you're like, oh no, I can understand the sentiment where you were very angry and, strucken with grief and you were upset. But you probably shouldn't have gone that route, right? You shouldn't have done that. You've probably seen plenty of episodes of, like Joe Judge Brown or Judge Judy or whatever these judge shows, where somebody does something to somebody else. Oh, they keyed their car, or they did this or so and so, and while you don't agree with it, you hear the other guy's part of the story, and they're like, oh yeah, well they did this, that, and this, and to the other people, and yeah, it was retaliatory. um and really the whole situation you guys are in is in a mess, and yeah, you shouldn't have retaliated and damaged his property or did whatever you do, but I can understand why you did it. And that's what I'm saying, like, I can understand why the left does the stuff that it does. And then people go, but no, freedom, you should never use violence. And it goes back to a video I did called The Monopoly on Violence. And your government, and mainly tyrants in general, they do believe in violence. That is the overwhelmingly and determinatory force that they use, and they wield it without thinking twice. And they will use violence on you, is the part I'm getting across. And they don't disagree with violence. I mean, you just look recently where Trump was bragging about taking out the Venezuelan drug boats, or um, whatnot. I always talk about the war hawk rhinos and stuff like that, who are always itching for a war in some foreign country. I mean, heck, we're sending they said CIA black site, soldiers over to in Venezuela. And um, Lindsey Graham is always talking again about like Russia and take out Putin and all this stuff. He has no problem assassinating political enemies or whatnot. Again, but the people that you will be in the crosshairs aren't always the people that you want take it out. So I going back to the whole theme here. I asked Yoel and Mari, do you think the Cuban people will have to get violent, or are they just going to talk it out? How do you think that situation's going to fold? And at the end of the day, I mean, they might even say, I mean, I doubt they'll ever see this message or respond to it or any way, but maybe they'll just say like, yeah, they're going to have some political process or something. But I think they know in their hearts the truth is that that regime's going to have to be overthrown. And what does that look like? Same thing with Kim Jong Un, North Korea or whatnot. If the North Korean people are ever to be freed, what would that look like? You think someone's just going to come out of nowhere with a rational speaking point and start a political party, or spread the message, and people are going to protest, and it doesn't look like Tiananmen Square, and the tanks don't just roll those people over, and that they're not going to have to literally fight off the soldiers in the streets to reclaim the country, storm the castle, and take them down? Like, is that not how it's going to happen? Why don't the Israels and Palestinians just talk it out? And figure it out. Well, they had the peace deal recently that looks like it was already, you know, put to the wayside. I heard they're back to attacking each other, which, um, who's shocked? But, we should all just talk it out. Why doesn't Russia and Ukraine just talk it out? Why didn't anyone ever, from any time in history, just talk it out? Because it's always come down to a red line. One side saying, I'm doing this, and the other side saying, no. You're not going to do that. You're not going to cross that line. But, government understands your enemies, your government understands violence. Your enemies understand violence. So you better start understanding it. And, Republicans just, whatever, Republicans, the right, however you want to describe it, they need, I don't know what to say, like, they need to get an understanding of it. And they refuse to believe it. They're still playing this, I don't know if it's, like just ignorance or what it is, where they just don't get it. I mean, you had Joe Rogan recently, and I think it was Cernovich or some other people who roasted Rogan for his recent episode on one of his podcasts where he was like, Trump is getting really dark, with all this, going into the streets and the deportations and all this, and he's like, you need to have a heart. And Cernovich was saying, I'm not sure if this was Cernovich, but I saw multiple people hit him on this. Like, dude, you moved from California, and, your $1 million estate into Texas, where you live on like a ranch, and you don't have to deal with these people. Even though I do believe he's gonna have to deal with them soon, because, like I said, Texas is getting taken over. And he's in Austin, so you're pretty much in a communist um section of Texas. So eventually it'll get on your doorstep as well. And where are you going to run and hide to? And I did an episode of balkanization. And then you ain't going to run and hide from this fight. The fight will eventually come to your doorstep. But, it is like people always talk about bleeding heart liberals. It's becoming the bleeding heart Republicans. And have a heart. How about have a heart for the angel moms? How about have a heart for, all these people who are getting killed by, third world savages that we're importing in? What about have a heart for Lake and Riley, who's, haven't had her skull bashed in? How about have a heart for Molly Tibbetts, who got chopped up in a cornfield? And how about have a heart for all these little girls in Europe who are getting mounted by the Muslim jihadis and getting knifed? How about have a heart for them? And to take the cake, you got these, soft Republicans. Talking about weak Republicans, you got this group called the Young Republicans who got a bunch of leaked text messages and group chats and stuff like that, with several different comments, inappropriate comments, stuff like that. And the Republicans come there and crucify their own, coming out, denouncing them, telling the leadership they need to resign, you know, uh, basically canceling these people. The same thing we talked originally about, Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk's relationship, where Nick was ostracized and um, pretty much shunned out of the right wing movement, and then you realize that you end up with him anyway. So it always comes for full circle. But that's the way the right acts, and they've kicked out tons of other members. Was it Rep King? um, that they kicked out a while back for some inappropriate comments, and even MTG and stuff like that. I think I can't remember what it was she said that got her kicked out of her position or stripped of her committees or whatnot. It might have been Jewish space lasers. I can't remember at the time what it was that actually got her removed from that committee, but the right is always fighting with amongst itself. And I've done plenty of videos about this, about the right wing civil war, and mainly the cowardice of the rhinos. And you keep taking these positions of that we're holier than thou, and we're just gonna debate our way through this, and it's just gonna be rainbows and butterflies. Again, you need to wake up and smell the coffee and realize where you're at and what time we're in. And I just did the video on that. Do you know what time it is? Do you realize what time we're living in and what it's gonna take to get us out, to get on the other side of this? Um, and I don't think the mainly most of our leadership really understands what it's gonna take. Um, but anyway, man, I think I'm probably gonna wrap that up, and I'll talk about something different come Friday. I wanted to shift to the economical situation and touch on that a little bit, so that'll probably be a future video. Like, share, subscribe. And let me know in the comment section below what you think about it. Until the next one, man, you know what it is. We are on our own. Nobody's coming to save us. So get right with God, because only God can save you. Freedom fighters out.